question about tech workers. Specifically, how are you going to activate the new residents, including the tech workers, and convince or encourage them to vote progressive?
Can I take
How are you
that one?
going to like register them and then convince
That's-
them?
Yeah.
What? How many of them are registered?
Yeah.
And how might they change the makeup?
Yeah.
Because we lost a lot of
So-
progressive votes.
So I'll just speak to my experience. You know, on Facebook, I post these little sayings that I come up with all the time, and one of them was wanted more haters, less haters, but like haters spelled HAIGHT, so more haters, less haters. Right after I did that, this guy who works at Google donated $500 to my campaign. That doesn't happen very often, but it could. And he has been great because, and he says too that he lived here before he started working for Google. And so there are a lot of these bridge people who actually, once, I think someone said, maybe in this room said this recently, that once people have been here for 2 or 3 years, they start to feel like they're part of San Francisco, 3 or 4 years. And there are a lot of those bridge people here that we can appeal to in that way. And the reason why they're the good ones, and he said, you're going to say I'm one of the good ones, and that rankles me. And I said, well, you are one of the good ones because you care about your impact on your neighborhood. And so I think there is the opportunity to reach out. And I'm a technology person too. I mean, I was born in San Jose. My boyfriend in high school, his brother was working on a failed version of Second Life, you know, like back in the 90s. You know, so I grew up with my little Macintosh computer. I love technology. And so I think this idea of we need to disrupt bad things. We need to disrupt pay-to-play politics. We need to, you know, disrupt things that aren't good, but then we need to innovate and iterate upon how we invent this eco-city of the future, where we're actually working together and we all get to belong here and support the well-being of the system.
Anyone else on that question?
Well, you raised an interesting question about registering. So far, and I've looked into this, and so has Corey Cook at USF with the voter reg data, and it's not an exact science, but so far, a lot of the recent arrivals to San Francisco are not registering to vote. They're not voting, they're not, and I just think to myself, you know, I mean, one of the reasons is, you see what happens. The people get on the Google bus in the morning and they go to work where they get breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and a massage, and whatever else they need. And then they come home at 9 o'clock at night or 9:30 at night, and they go to their little apartment and they fall asleep, and they're not really engaged in the neighborhood. But, you know, you're right. They will be, because at some point, they're going to meet other tech workers and have a family, and they're going to settle. They're going to start thinking about, or not. I mean, I'm saying that at some point they'll have kids. They'll settle down. They'll start thinking about the schools. After either they'll be here for 2 years, make as much money as they can, like the gold miners, strip the money they can out of the city, and split, which we're seeing some are happening. Or they're going to stay here, and once they've been here a few years, they're going to have to start thinking about their neighborhood and their concerns. And you know, they're workers too. Some of them are getting paid very highly, although even what they're getting paid now isn't enough to live in San Francisco in a lot of cases. But they're workers too, and they don't all love their bosses, and they don't love their commutes, and they don't love what's going on in their neighborhoods. And I think that this is a doable thing.
The other part of that question was, does anybody know what percentage of eligible residents are actually registered to vote these days? Because we've lost so many residents.
450,000. Out of the 650,000 eligible, so about 400,000 are actually registered.
And turnout last election was what?
About 130,000.
It was, we didn't show about this. In the last election, we saw the lowest voter turnout across the country in 72 years.
And that, we need to change that, otherwise how are we going to get anything done?
Exactly.
But you change that by creating a plan together and getting people to have a vision to work for. We've had too many of these no campaigns, no this and that, and it's good. We've been actually winning some of them, but we have to have yes campaigns of what are we working for, what are we fighting for. And that's what I think Amy and I are proposing as mayoral candidates, that we actually have propositions that we work for, and we have a seat in the mayor's office that we can actually create change. Ed Lee could be creating. He does not have the political will, and our communities have lost the political will and political vision. and we can reignite that together. I personally commit to getting folks back here because we need them back here. We need the teachers back here. We need the nurses back here. We need the San Francisco City workers back here. They're the ones that push the buttons and pull the levers for us. And you have to have a stake in the decisions you're making. If not, it doesn't work, and we're back to tyranny. Good old King George is coming back unless we take the shoes from out him and tie them together.
You know, there's a weird thing about voter registration too, that you think, who does voter registration in the city? Well, the Democratic Party ought to be, but they're not really doing voter registration. The San Francisco Department of Elections ought to be doing, but they don't do voter registration, they don't spend any money on it. And most of the campaigns don't do voter registration. And the reason they don't is campaigns in San Francisco are set up so scientifically now that you go out and you pick people who have voted in 4 of the last 5 elections, and you devote all of your energy to them because you know they're going to vote. And you don't devote any energy to going and registering people because you don't know if they're going to vote or not. So if you have limited resources, the way campaigns work now, there's nobody who has the motivation or the incentive to go out and register voters, and it's really too bad. I mean, again, why doesn't the city spend $1 million registering voters? We have a Department of Elections, you know, why not do that?
Speaking of voting, how do we re-engineer the SFDCC now that the Bay Guardian is out of commission? And Tim, do you have a list of possible replacements?
I was pulling my hair out this morning when I was writing about what happened last night, thinking about that exact fact.
What's the SFDC?
Right, it's the San Francisco Democratic County Central Committee, and what it is, it's the political arm of the Democratic Party in San Francisco. And they get to decide who the Democratic Party endorses to office, which means something because for an awful lot of people in San Francisco, 70% of the city is registered Democrats, and those people get the Democratic Party slate card, and it means something to them, right? And whether it's true or not, it does, right? So the DCCC has been taken over by the real estate interests, and it's really awful. And I don't know about what we're going to replace the Bay Guardian with, but I do know that we have to start thinking now about who we're going to run that can win seats on the DCCC for next June. Is the election. We have to start thinking about recruiting candidates because it's a disaster. It's happening there now.
And that's why I switched to the green, so you could vote green and scare the hell out of me.
I want to ask.
You register green.